I am a climate scientist. I'm a professor at a public research university. I teach undergraduate and graduate students, and I conduct research in the field of climatology. But for a number of years now, I have wondered why I occasionally find myself interacting with members of the public that choose to deny the scientific findings of my field. As a scientist, I always urge everyone to be skeptical. Be wary of what you hear in the media, and always check what is said with the scientific facts. I urge you to please take time to read through the scientific literature on climate change. There is a lot of it. And please don't just take at face value what one person is telling you on TV or in social media. I understand that unless you're a climate scientist, it is very hard to decide what is true or correct on this issue. Just like it's hard to know what to do if you have a fault in your car or a disease in your body, unless you're a mechanic or a medical doctor. So what do we all do in these sorts of situations? We seek expert advice. If you are unsure about climate change, you should seek expert advice from climate scientists. I can tell you as a climate scientist that the climate science is very clear. You see, science is not an opinion poll. Science is about moving toward objective truths through the scientific process of making hypotheses and testing them using evidence. There is no I think this and you think that in science. It's either right or it's wrong. It's either backed by evidence or it isn't. It is certain that the climate is changing, and it is very likely that humans are the dominant cause of the change. Climate science has been certain of this for several decades now. The science has yet to be disproven in any way, and the findings are on the same measure of likelihood as the conclusion that smoking causes cancer. But I suspect that if you're watching this, you probably don't believe a word of what I just said. So again, I encourage you to please read the scientific literature and also look at the simpler, plain English, non-jargony summary reports prepared by teams of scientists such as the US National Climate Assessment Research Program or the IPCC assessment reports. Read those for yourself as they summarize the conclusions of the scientific community. The conclusions that the climate is changing and it's caused by humans are echoed by every scientific organization around the world, including the National Academies of Science and the Royal Society of Science, as well as all of these other organizations. Another good resource that I like to recommend is skepticalscience.com, as it takes every major question or doubt that you may have about climate change, like some say the sun is just getting hotter, or the warming is part of natural cycles, or the satellite and temperature datasets are wrong, etc., etc. And climate scientists answer your questions with scientific data and facts. The website actually gives links to the scientific papers so you can read the findings for yourself. A lot of people like to mention the consensus on climate change, that 97% of climate scientists on the left figure here agree that climate change of the last 150 years is caused by human activity that dominates over natural variability. When I see these kinds of polls, I wonder why public opinion on the right is so different from the findings of science on the left. But I also have an issue with scientific understanding being presented in this way. Science is not a consensus or a democracy. We don't vote on what we think the best conclusion is. We make hypotheses, we test them, and we draw conclusions based on the evidence. We keep eliminating hypotheses that are not plausible, given the evidence, until we arrive at conclusions that are consistent with the evidence. This is how every field of science works. If the 3% of scientists in this figure did have evidence to prove their points, they would be right, despite being in the minority. So when scientists mention a consensus, they mean that there is simply a huge weight of evidence for a particular conclusion, not that they had a vote. That's just not how science works. So let's delve deeper into why I think there is this failure of scientific understanding to convince public opinion. Televised debates between one climate scientist or Bill Nye and one denier who isn't a climate scientist come across to the public as an argument over science that is not yet settled, and framing anything like that is inherently biased, as you can almost always find two people with opposing viewpoints on just about anything. Such debates are not informative and should be taken with a healthy dose of skepticism. There are a small number of people out there that manage to get airtime and write blogs, etc., that can be very convincing in their denial of climate science. I urge you again to please be skeptical. The media often claims to be objective on issues and only reports the facts, but framing climate change as a debate, implying that there are two sides to the issue, is patently wrong. Climate change is not a debate between a skeptic and Bill Nye, it is scientific fact. I think it is also very important to consider where you are getting your information from. Are you listening to a scientist from a scientific organization such as a university or a research institute? Or are you actually listening to a non-expert from a non-scientific organization such as the Heartland or Cato Institutes? Many such non-scientific organizations are funded by companies with vested interests, and the goal of these organizations is to mislead the public and deny scientific evidence. But how does the biased portrayal in the media and the efforts of some misleading organizations manage to sway the public? Firstly, I think that no one likes to be told that they are wrong. A psychologist called Festinger first proposed the idea of cognitive dissonance that basically says that we all have an inner drive to hold our beliefs in harmony and avoid dissonance or conflict of ideas. He said that to reduce a potential conflict in our minds, we can change our belief, but again, it's hard to admit you're wrong. An easier thing for us to do is to look for confirmation that our beliefs fit reality by finding alternative facts. So when a denier tells the public that there is no climate change and it's not caused by humans, it provides that confirmation that some people may be looking for. But cognitive dissonance only explains why it's hard to change your ideas, not why some people want to hold on to wrong ideas in the first place. I think to explain that, we have to think about what climate change means. Climate change is a tragedy of the commons. The atmosphere is a shared resource, a common good that has been spoiled by individual users acting independently. Just like this example where a common grazing area is overused and degraded because no single farmer has any incentive to limit their grazing. If one farmer does remove their sheep, other farmers will just increase the size of their flocks and overgrazing will continue. Unless all farmers collectively limit their grazing, the common pasture will be lost. With human-induced climate change, the atmosphere's chemistry has been degraded by the collective action of fossil fuel use. In economics, this is termed a negative externality. One individual's actions are not enough to address the problem. It requires us to act together, which means government intervention. And many people are opposed to government solutions, such as a carbon tax and other forms of legislation. So it's easier to deny human-caused climate change exists altogether than to agree it's a problem. Because if people agree it's a problem, then we'd have to do something about it. And the only way to do something about the problem is collectively through government. So I think that is why some people reject the science and the reality of climate change, because the solutions presented are big government solutions. Climate change has become political, especially in the United States. But thermometers, atmospheric gases, and most importantly science, are not political and don't care whether you're a conservative or a liberal. Your political affiliation doesn't change the scientific fact that the planet is warming because of more greenhouse gases emitted by humans. I'd like to finish by giving my personal thoughts on responding to climate change. Again, I don't understand why some people argue about the scientific conclusions when we really should be debating the appropriate response in terms of policy, and that's where the politics should come in. Also, why not look for a free market solution to the problems of human-induced climate change? Why not propose solutions that do not require government intervention? Free markets made a fossil fuel economy that we now know is unsustainable. So why not let innovation and the technology of the free markets find a solution to the problem? I know that a lot of people are against government intervention and oversight on issues involving the markets, but our fossil fuels are already government subsidized, so why not take those tax dollars and invest them in new, clean, renewable technologies? and allow the technological innovation of people and the markets to take the world forward to a cleaner, brighter future.